Well, hello, and a very warm welcome to you all. My name is Mark Morley, and this is the IT Business Partner Playbook, a new series where I'll be joined every week by business relationship managers and business partners from around the globe. We'll be discussing their role in helping companies avoid project failure, as well as their role in driving innovation. Our aim with this podcast is to share experiences, share knowledge and insights, all to help companies and individuals alike fully understand the benefits and potential of this capability. In our last episode, we met with Meghna Garg, a technology business partner at Nomad Foods. It was great to hear Meghna's experiences across different industries and especially how the FMCG companies seem to be able to utilize BRM so effectively. Her view also on how the maturity of an organization and the IT department play a significant role in the BRM's effectiveness. This week, we're talking to Denis Detros. I hope I've got that right, Denis. Yep. He's an IT business partner for Bausch & Lomb in the UK. Denis has been an IT business partner for over 10 years and is also an active member of the community. And Denis, you're actually at the UK event back in November when this podcast was spawned. So I'm really happy you're here to take part and be among the first to join in. So good afternoon to you, Denis. Thanks so much for joining us. Can I hand over to you for a quick intro and then we'll share what really went on at that event?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Denis Detros. I'm an IT business partner at Bausch & Lomb, looking after the UK, Nordics, Ireland, Iberia, and also looking after a few different applications as well in my BP role. One being PeopleSoft, another being one that I've kind of led called IOTA 2, and also look after the EDI intake, which all of it kind of helps in the BP role. But I actually started my working career as an accountant back in Australia. I came over to the UK for a working holiday. 30 plus years, I'm still here on what I'd like to work.
Visa.
The visa's changed, but nationality and everything now, so that's good. But keeping it like in the holiday mode sort of keeps it fun in some ways. Keeps things interesting. But I started off as an accountant here, and back in those days, IT was still pretty new. Excel, actually, Lotus 123 was what my first job here for Bearings, the bank that was too big to fail. Back in the day, I worked on Nick Leeson's desk and left before all the trouble happened there. So it was interesting times. But I was contracting, and one of the agencies sort of said to me, "If you're going to stay in the UK, you need a UK qualification." And I thought about it, and I thought, well, I don't want to do an accounting degree, any accounting qualifications, because I kind of realised that what wasn't the career I wanted to follow. And I did a Master of Science in Information Systems Design Analysis. So almost kind of like a business analyst type degree, but with a lot more insight. And having worked out in the industry, I added a lot to that sort of role, because I knew that things worked. I could see the kids in my class that had come straight from university, done the bachelor's and gone to the masters. They didn't have that real world experience. And they were treating everything in textbook style, whereas I was kind of, being more practical, saying, well, that's what happened in the real world. And from there, I worked for a record company, global record company, and got to do a nice little bit of traveling, but that was looking after Oracle Financials, helping install that. And then the next role was for a serviced office company where they were rolling out JD Edwards. So we did about 60 of those, and I kind of transitioned there into a project manager and then the business systems manager. So that gave me a lot of practical application knowledge and dealing with customers, being the internal clients. Moved on there to Jones Lang LaSalle real estate company as my first IT business partner role. Never heard of it before.
Right.
It was brand new to me. Never heard of that terminology before. And in fact, when I was actually being recruited for the role, it was actually going to be as a product manager, which I did, which I think is kind of interesting, because it's kind of BPs and product managers. There's kind of a theme sort of happening with going forward. But it didn't turn out to be that, and it was quite an interesting journey, because the team there was what we called Business Technology Solutions. great team, doing a lot of innovation in the real estate space, trying out lots of new technologies to improve the business, make the business more commercial, more effective. And I was kind of surprised when I joined, how much was to be done. Data, in silos, the business talked in silos. And when I started the role, we've brought a few new business partners as part of the team, it was kind of reactionary, where we'd respond to people's requests. By the time I left, we'd turned that around and we'd become a bit more strategic. Looked after specific business units, got them together. It's quite interesting in one scenario, as I was bringing two of these pillars together within and having meetings together, discovered they were both working on trying to develop the same app. And let's sort of combine resources here. So it was kind of good to talk. And that's after that, I moved to Bausch & Lomb as her business partner here. We've got about 5 different sort of business partners across Europe doing a similar sort of role to me in the application space. We also have, and this was interesting to me because I'd never worked for a manufacturing company before, business partners working in the manufacturing side and distribution side. Whole new ball game for me to learn how, not only manufacturing work, but from a medical regulatory point of view, the number of restrictions that you have, what you do, and so it was quite a learning curve. And sometimes you need to know stuff, sometimes you don't need to know stuff. It's you have to, you can go down rabbit holes trying to learn about all the different things when is this going to be relevant to me? Often these nuggets of information do come in useful when you're dealing with the business and how to help them and going forward.
Yeah. Have you noticed, because one thing that really surprised me is that when it was actually a BRM Connect event that we had here in South Africa a few years ago, that we have these big multinational companies, but household names, that don't really have a handle on what IT projects are running. So you mentioned that you had 2 projects running at the same time, they were doing the same thing. That really surprised me, that you can have a number of these projects running, but there isn't oversight. So you can either have people doing the same thing, which is surprising, but also similar things that kind of contradict, or they're using resources for something's going to add value and something isn't. Is that something that where you are now, is that something as a BRM, you've tried to ensure that there is that oversight?
That's what we're trying to do, and we're trying to get rid of, basically, it's that shadow IT where things are being developed without your knowledge, without your oversight. And when I came in, there were particularly on the not so much technology, but on the internet side, some of the teams had set up websites that became zombie websites because the marketing team people had set them up had left. The local people had left as well, so no one had the keys to these websites. We basically had to dig around and go to regulatory authorities to try and get access to them. So that was kind of interesting to see that happen. But there's often a case where people try to do this. They want to be effective themselves because they want to think that, oh look, I'm just investigating this, and it's like, hang on, let's talk about this together. And particularly in this medical space, depending what they're doing, not only have you got to worry about just general GDPR type stuff, there is all the regulatory work as well that takes place. That needs to be thoroughly checked, and legal gets involved, and we've had quite a lot of new systems come in to make the business go through a record of processing activities, document form that they've got to fill out to make sure that all the steps they're doing, all the data that they're collecting is going to go through fine. Are we capturing that for the right reasons? How long are we holding on to it for? All those sort of GDPR type things are in these forms now. So that's quite good. But still, people go off and do things, and word gets out, and they come back and they'll get me involved. Hopefully, not always, but hate it.
Do you think, because over the last few years, the access to these things is much greater, and business seems to be much more confident about what they need and going out to get it? So do you think you think the reason for business doing stuff more by themselves is because there is that's more available and more access, or do you think it's because they don't want to wait, for IT to catch up with them anymore? They feel that.
There's a bit of both. You've always got the early adopters, those that are tech savvy in the company, and they're the ones who sometimes it's a challenge to build that relationship with, because they're like, I know what I'm doing. It's okay. You don't need to get involved. It's like, well, actually, I do need to get involved, because really all that technology needs to be signed off now. You can't just go and get any piece of software that you want. On the flip side too, it's good to have those people, but we're still learning it. AI is the biggest thing that's going on at the moment. We're heavily involved in learning it ourselves. We're learning what's going on, all the things you can do with it. And we've been really fortunate that we've had somebody brought into the company to lead this for us. And it's given us lots of ideas of what we can do, processes that we can improve. And there was one that, I attended one of the sessions, and I thought, hey, we can improve one of our processes by, using AI to read files and do this and to extract the data. And I started pushing up the chain to find out, well, actually, yeah, we've already thought of that too. We're doing that. We're doing that. So that's good. Similar, at the same time, we had a company try to sell us what we could have done internally. So that was interesting. People are approaching you. I've had phone calls from people. So AI is so new. I think that everyone wants to jump on the bandwagon.
Yeah,
something that's good. You've got to take carefully. Not only because of that it's still fairly new out there, but there's a lot of implications about where you share your data. We're lucky that we've got because we're Microsoft partner, where we can keep our data secure and away from the general public, but it's actually making sure that our staff know only put into this one, not into the general chat GPT arena.
Do you also find that it's difficult with so much out there that people can get kind of overexcited, and so these all these wonderful things that can be done, but then you think, well, actually, what's it going to do for our end customer? What's it going to do for the business? Do we need this? Is that something you also find?
Yeah, a lot of the time. They don't see the overall cost of it, as not just of the financial cost, but the time it'll take for something to be implemented, and the knock-on effect that it have on other applications or processes that may be intertwined with their case. It's lots of people come up with this. We've had some of our colleagues who've sort of developed their own little processes using tools that are available to them, and they've tacked it onto some of the main systems. So we make a change to the main system, and suddenly their little side project that we didn't know about breaks down, and that's not complaining, saying we're not getting the reports that we need. It's like, it's not supported. You didn't tell us about this. So we try to bring that into our scope somehow. But like everybody, we're resource constrained. We can only do so much. It's I think that's a challenge that everybody faces. You can only do so much in the available time, available day.
How is your team viewed by the rest of the business? You kind of well received? Does everyone know what you do?
Yeah, I'm lucky because I sit on the UK leadership team. So people I deal with the business units, deal with the commercial side. So they're aware of my role here. In some of the other countries, I think the role's perceived differently. I think that it's further back down the scale, more on the tactical side, and I think that's what we're trying to change. That we're trying to make sure that people sort of see us as partners, that we're here to be proactive. We're here to be help them build their future strategies. We do have a challenge with the fact that because we are a global company, strategy will come from global. There will be a global strategy that they will, make sure that we use one set of tools. At the moment, we're trying to unify our electronic invoicing, just trying to see, rather than having it all scattered across with different companies, try to do that. And that's historical because each country was doing its own thing. Now we're trying to present that as one company, one product. It just makes things a lot easier for teams managing the processes. And, from IT's point of view, we're not dealing with, a dozen different suppliers. We're only dealing with one or two, depending on what the need is.
With you coming from the business background, so I asked this to all the guests, kind of who do you get along with the best? Who do you feel closest to? And a lot of times, people kind of forget. And then Delizu, the last guest, was quick to mention that you can't forget IT. And I think it's because a lot of people come from the IT side. They feel that they've got more work to do with business, and then they do leave the IT team behind. With you coming from business, do you feel it's been the other way around? You've tried more to get involved with the IT team, and that's who you kind of partner closer with?
Because I manage some of the people in IT, I'm definitely involved on that side. I have regular catch-ups with people in the IT side. I am part of the extended IT European leadership. I am pretty much implanted in IT, but having that business background, I'm close to people in the business area. And sometimes it's simply because you're working on a project and you get more of a relationship simply because you spend more time. Yeah, business partnerships is fundamental. You need to build those relationships, and I find that spending time with him on the projects is the biggest way of doing it. The leadership team meetings are good as well because you're obviously involved and you're seeing them on a regular basis. There, you have your cadence. You meet the people regularly as well. Sometimes those cadences drop because you're busy, they're busy. And I think that's a challenge. And I think one of the biggest challenges that I faced is that because of the reach that I've got is just the number of relationships you have to try and build. And particularly when I go to Spain, I'm not there all the time. I'm not on site. That's a challenge to try and build that relationship. Those roles change as well over the years. So you got to reestablish those connections. And you just got to use different techniques to try and become more integrated into their life. Just remember, hey, I'm here. Not all relationships are going to be the same level. Some are going to be more involved than others. But I think that it's making sure that they know that you're there, that you're available.
Yeah.
The worst.
I'm sorry.
In the worst case, make sure that they're aware of you.
Yeah. How formalized are those relationships? So do you have do you have promises that you have to keep, and are they the same throughout your business partner team?
Not to be honest, our business partner team, where we recently had some training on being really high performing people, and we're kind of aligning how we're going to operate together. So that's something that we're evolving as a team now.
Right.
Myself, promises, I think, is a strong word.
Agreements, should I say?
Yeah. It depends on the delivery of what we're trying to deliver on, what the project is. And sometimes it's hard to deliver when there's a lot of areas that they're quite complex, and because the complex coming from the commercial space that have come from before. We're talking about various products and doing various marketing for them and the legalities behind it, and trying to understand the process. You try to strip away everything to try and get to what the core is. And once you understand that core, what the core is, what the basics are, and this is where almost the MSc that I did helps. What are the core things that we're looking at here? It becomes a lot simpler, and then you can sort of agree a timeline or make a promise, depending on what happens. But then, on the flip side too, you've also got to check what resources are available, what's needed, and are we doing this as an RFP project where you've gone out to market? That creates a lot more paperwork, which is fine because you need that. And I quite think that when you have that formalization on those sort of projects, you feel like you're getting a lot more backing than with some of the smaller projects, which can be, we just need some changes here. We just need to improve that. We're building a new customer database or connection. It's a smaller process. and you just pass that down to who needs to work on it. So listen on those ones, but they still come to you because you're the point of contact.
Right. With you mentioned the high performing training that you went on, which I put great feedback on. Was that just for business partners, or did you get people from the business and IT involved in that as well?
We got more than business partners, but solely from IT. We had some project managers, some product owners come in, and thankfully, I've got to admit that I did the course last year and came back saying that I think we need to get everybody on this course because it provides real hands-on fundamental basics for people to learn from. The practical applications that they can take away and use in every day, builds a different mindset to people, and particularly for those in IT that have always been IT, the parts about empathy I think were really great because sometimes they don't put themselves in the business's shoes, that they don't see it as a business problem. I always think back to when I started that job at the service office company, and I was looking after the system, and a connection was kind of made. If the system goes down, we can't issue the invoices. If we can't issue invoices, we don't get paid. If we don't get paid, you don't get paid.
Yeah. Then suddenly they listen.
Yeah, then you start putting that connection through. Here, dealing with a product that's quite visible, I can go to a shop and see or pharmacy, and I'll see our products are on the shelf there. I go to the opticians and I can see them using our products as well. I've been to hospitals and seen our products in there. I've even witnessed cataract surgery as part of this. This is part of immersion. Getting to know business. It's and that's something the course talks about. And I strongly recommend that for any business partner. Get out there, do a day in the life of your business, or many days, as the case may be, if you're looking after different areas. And yet, my sort of role is focused particularly at the moment on one of the business units, simply because of the projects I've been working on. So, my aim is now to get out and do a bit more with some of the other ones, and follow their team a bit more, and that way, the more I understand about how they operate, the more I can help them build a strategy for going forward.
Yeah, a number of guests have mentioned this as part of building their business IQ. So they want to go out and walk the shop floor, because if they don't see the end customer, they can't really understand what it is the business is trying to do. So once they've gone out and got that experience, it really helps them, become more strategic.
Absolutely. Because if you can see the pain points the business is having, and just the daily operations, you can make many improvements. In fact, just this week, I attended one of our sales kickoff meetings for the year, and they went through all their product launches they're having and new plans that they're having. I'm thinking, oh, okay, we need to check this. We need to just I can away with thinking that there's a lot of good to go to these meetings, and I need to go to more of them. There's a lot of stuff that I don't need to know when they're going through and actually detailing some of the surgeries. I'm learning not to be a squeamish when I want to see eye operation. It's challenging. It's part of my job. Just don't look at the place.
Yeah, I'm not sure I fancy it either. But this is one of the great things I think about the BRM and the BP role, that they can, this is part of their job. So they do have the time to go and do this, and it is such a critical thing to do. And speaking with Dawn, she was saying, Dawn Wilward, that she listens to the student radio, because it's just, you can really hear what your end customer, what their pain points are, and then you come away with ideas you can then take back to the business or to IT and say, we're working on this, but I think maybe this is more important. So having the ability and the gumption to do that, I think is really important.
Absolutely. In fact, in this particular sales conference, I actually asked to go on to it because I knew it was going to be a worthwhile thing to do. And sometimes I think I'm a shy, quiet person, and I force myself onto these things. And I think you do. Sometimes people see business partners as outgoing and gregarious, and some of us are. But people at the community events, you see you've got different personality traits. I think that's interesting as business partners, seeing all the different sort of characters we've got who work here, who do the role. It's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, I've said this each time, but one of the reasons that we were really happy to get involved in this field is because the people we were meeting were just generally really great people. So they're nice to work with. You do have to have a thick skin to be a BRM, I think, because you are going to have some challenging times where you need to be able to, know that it's not personal.
Yeah, definitely. I think my time as a business systems manager helped when the systems were crashing there and people screaming at you. It's like, yeah, okay, country can reach out.
Shame. And then what are the kind of biggest challenges that you've experienced as a BRM that have made your job difficult to do?
Interestingly, just some company swerve balls that have happened. The company we were a part of Bausch Health, a parent company, and when I joined, it was all one company. Resources were shared amongst the whole organization, and then they decided to package us off and split us out as a separate company, and that took 2 years of effort, and that diverted attention away from projects. Even though I wasn't involved in the technical side because that's not my bag, we still had to communicate out to the business to make sure that they knew what was going on. Yes, that certain dates were happening, and there were changes to like the emails for a while, and different systems lost access for short periods until we had our own versions. All these sort of things, and that's one thing that I kind of never kind of anticipated in the role. This sort of major sort of shift of happening, and yeah, it's kind of prepared me now, because now that we're a standalone company, they could sell us off at some point. Yeah, so that's going to create more challenges again, depending on what and new owners at some point want to do with us. If they'll integrate us with their own IT, if they have no IT, if they want to streamline us, let's just be prepared for those challenges. They're things that you try and plan for the year ahead, or you try and do a 100-day plan. What I'm doing in the next 3 months or whatever, and these things come down from above that you had no inkling of. Those sort of level conversations happen very high up, and that's kind of like the hardest thing to deal with when you've got these uncertainties and you're just waiting for things to happen or not happen, as the case may be.
Yeah. Just talking about uncertainties, we've worked with BRM teams that have kind of vanished overnight when a new CIO came in.
We've never done that. Yep.
Yeah. So there is, there's that level that you never really know what's going to happen. You mentioned earlier that the role you were looking at was like a product manager, business partner, and it's interesting now that we've seen there's a lot more focus on products. They want people to be accountable for something.
Yes.
So we have seen that business partners are being moved into the product roles. Do you see that as a future of BRM, business partnering, or just depends on the business?
Oh, yes, I do. Because, as I said at the start, one of the products I look after, one of the strands I look after is a product called IOTA 2. It started off as, from the BP sort of perspective, we've got a problem, an issue, help us resolve it. And went out and we did the RFP, got suppliers in, started the project, got a PM on board, and because you're so involved in the project, you know what's going on, you build up that knowledge, you become a product manager, because you're guiding this product through its phases. We've done phase 1, we're about to release phase 2, already we're looking at phase 3, and because of going out to the hospitals and meeting the nurses and the theatre staff and seeing the doctors doing the cataract surgery, this is where you see all the pain points, and you think, how can we improve this? And to me, this is quite a challenge as well, because I'm actually dealing with physical customers, and who, normally in the past I haven't actually had to deal with. Normally it's always been internal. You're dealing with a new system, it's the finance team or the marketing team or whatever, you're dealing with them, and it's fine if something goes wrong. This time, you're customer facing, everything's perfect. And I think that's put extra pressure on the project because I don't want to release anything until now it's 100%. It's not managing this from the product perspective, but it's part of my role. It's not the all of my roles. But the skill set of being a business partner, because it built a relationship. Building a relationship with the team was really helpful because they invited me to a surgical strategy day and when discussing digital because they wanted me to represent from an IT point because I knew how their business operated.
Yeah.
So that was great because it showed that they had respect to me and the fact I knew what I was hopefully talking about.
All right. So do you have business partners elsewhere in the business? So, I mean, the ones that I was always familiar with was the finance business partner and an HR business partner, but they were always a lot more operational, kind of tactical roles. It's like a one-to-one relationship with someone in the business. Do you have those people with those roles within your business, and do you do any kind of engagement with them?
Yeah, the finance business partner, because I have to look after some budgets, so engage with her on that. And to make sure that we're doing everything right, and I'm hoping that as my past experience as an accountant, I sort of do get the numbers hopefully right. But there's always some machinations behind the scenes that every company does something weird and wonderful with the budgets.
Well, as an accountant, you can always make the numbers work.
You definitely try. You definitely try. But even though she's our business partner, her job title isn't that. She has a more finance designated role. And the same with our HR business partner. Again, it's on a more technical basis. It's dealing with recruitment issues, staffing issues, and the like. It's not how can HR help IT develop? There is a bit with when it comes to training. But I think in a lot of cases, companies' HR teams focus on what the company's doing rather than what he's doing when it comes to, we're kind of more specialist in what we want to do individually as people. Because even within the team, we've got people who are particular application specialists or infrastructure specialists. They want something too generic per se.
I always thought it was a shame because I come from a finance background. I was an accountant originally as well for my sins. Probably found it as much fun as you did. But it did surprise me, or it's kind of a shame in a way that they can't be more strategic. So it seems that the IT business partner has kind of been developed later, but is now more immediately more strategic. And I think the HR teams and the finance teams could be a lot more successful in what they're doing. If they were to kind of take on some of the practices that the IT guys do.
Funny enough, I did actually recommend some of the courses to some of the previous HR directors and managers, and I don't know, I just kind of got the impression that they were too busy doing their day jobs to do this sort of thing, and be perhaps above their scope or outside their scope of what they wanted to do, or role as for their roles perhaps. I think that, and I agree. I think that's a shame because I think if people get more strategic, it can kind of help us. It's a two-way street. But on the same side, they're probably thinking we've got our day jobs to do. They've got the basic. Let them get that right, and then hopefully they can think about more things. And in the HR space, I know that they've got their own organisations and their own CPD to do. Same in finance. So I think for business partners, to get in there as a career path, I don't know. It may work. I don't know. I think it depends on the organisation and the size and how they operate as to how successful that is.
Yeah. I think as formalised training, it will probably never catch on because each of those functions has their own career path and own certification path, so they're not going to kind of want to deviate from that. But I think certainly, and we've heard some of the other guests have said that they've had their own like internal Connect events where they've shared what they're doing and shared how they're doing it. And so I think from that perspective, if you did give people a chance from those teams to learn about what you're doing from you, rather than an outside source, and I think that's, can only be a benefit.
Definitely idea. In fact, I know some of my colleagues in the BRM space have had done those, so I might try and pitch that idea actually. Venture for the future and see if we can work with it here.
One question that always comes up with BRMs is how to demonstrate value. It seems to be like an age-old question, and there are a lot of companies kind of having a lot of BRMs have their own approach to this. And I know the Purdue University in the US, they do a whole big amount of reporting on this, which is actually goes company wide. It's been really well received. Is that something that you do? How do you do?
No,
that?
No, we haven't done anything in that sort of space. The work that we do does get recognised, as in the sense that we have a company newsletter that goes out, and I've kind of featured in it a couple of times with the various projects I've been doing. So that kind of highlights, my name, my title, that what we've done, and this is on a global basis. So it's not reporting per se, but it's if you've managed to get into the newsletter, that means that what you've done's been recognized. So and then they're sharing the information across the company, so the rest of the company globally is aware that we're working on this project. In fact, with this scanner project that I'm working on, we're hoping to expand it possibly in other countries around the world. Depending on if we can get it right here, we've done it in several countries in Europe, expanding it further, and it's kind of recognition. I think the newsletter is kind of like showing that we've done value, saying that we've got successes out of our initiatives, and the fact that we're leading it as well. We've got to show that we're not just sort of, here you go, passing it on. But I also think that with these sort of situations, the business themselves don't often have the right skills and knowledge to do this project on their own, to do this type of project on their own. Some do. Not saying everybody in the same situation, but they need the business partners to help guide them down the right path. And ideally, I always have in my mind the ideal sort of project setup where you have a business analyst, a business partner, a project manager, a technical architect. That's kind of like my dream sort of suite for have a IT team to kind of run a project. That doesn't always happen. So you just got to go with the flow and work with what you got, and celebrate the success as best you can. Make sure that even a small success is always a success.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people don't do enough, is sharing those successes, because it's motivational for a start, but it also does demonstrate that you are having these successes. So I think if they can be shared, it's definitely a bonus. Do you find that the acceptance of BRM or business partnering, or the ability for you to perform your role, changes much across geographies? You mentioned that you look after a few countries.
Yes, yeah. I think in like Spain, because I'm not there all the time, it's probably more of a tactical role. They'll come to me with issues. When I go down there and talk to them, sometimes you'll find out more things. With the few that I've been able to build a bit more of a relationship with over the phone or over Teams, you find out a few more things. But yeah, it's quite hard there. I've visited some of my colleagues in other countries and seen how they work, and I think it's simply because of the way that they've evolved from desktop support, say, to business partners. The people, the local people, still treat them in that space, and they will go back to them because they have a desktop issue, rather than, oh, we're thinking about this, let's build how do we do this sort of thing. And I often think that that's a problem for any role where you've grown up in a company and stayed there for a while. People still remember you from those previous role, go back to you for that sort of support. Even though whereas in service offices, I still have people coming back to me for password resets even though this isn't my job anymore. But I know you can do it very quickly for me. Do it. Yes, fine. Because you built the relationship up with people.
Yeah, that's good. But there is a danger that if you keep doing it, then that's all they'll kind of come to you for. But
Exactly. And that's why, for some things now, I'm very careful about, what I help with. Yes, I want to help you, but this has got to go to the IT help desk. It's not my area anyway. So, I've got to pass it there and get them to work on this sort of stuff for you. I can only help with with what I can do. But even then, I think coming into this role at this level, rather than having grown up in it, I think makes a difference. I'd be interested to hear from other BPs and BRMs who've grown up in companies to see if they've been able to cut off their past roles.
Yeah. Do you? Because I've always thought that the BRM capability should be more a capability rather than a role thing. And so, are you conscious, or do you try that when you're dealing with your partners, you try to push out this kind of, or expand the role so that more and more people know about the way you do things, and you can end up people working together more without you needing to be involved?
Yeah, I've created a SharePoint site explaining what our role does as part of the UK SharePoint site. In fact, I helped set that up because during the pandemic we didn't have anything. We needed a central source to get information out, and I took the opportunity to say, "Hey, this is what I do." Because the pandemic hit just a few months after I started working here.
Oh, right.
So I'd only been in the company 5 months when the pandemic hit. And I think that was I think people forget that lasted, quite some time, and the effects it had on trying to, I wasn't really well known. I just visited the countries for the first time the month before, so I didn't have a chance to build relationships during that time. So it was quite difficult when you could speak to them, and also because there was no news from my own. It's just, here's Teams, go for it. But I kind of put it out there so that people could see it, so people have an idea of what we do. At least it's a static reference point that they can see, and then they can reach out to me so I can kind of further explain what our capabilities are and how we can help them. I think people got to kind of remember, we're not just in my case, I'm not just thinking about the technology that improve. It's, let's look at the process first. How can we improve the process? Where does the technology fit in on that? Can we improve the technology you've got? Because I found that in some other roles where people started complaining about the system. Oh, it's no good. It doesn't do what we want it to do. And I found that what had happened, they bought the system in several years ago. The people that got trained in it left, and they passed on certain knowledge to the next users, who passed on the next bit. It's effectively getting a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy. So we've done the track. So people just know the basics of how to get to from A to B to get their jobs done. They don't know what's involved in the what else the product can do. There's been no communications with the supplier. In that particular case, I started going to the supplier events and seeing, actually, on their roadmap, they've got all the things that our customers are complaining about, or our teams are complaining about. In fact, the system could do some things, but because there was no product owner in the business, on the business side, who follow that updates and things like that, they couldn't have done a lot of these things themselves. Instead, they went for a whole new system. So that kept me in a job as well. But I'd rather see them, exploit the technology they've got while it's viable. If it's not viable, then there you go. You need to get another system.
We found that when digital transformation was the buzzword du jour, and everyone was kind of clamoring to just take on as much technology as they could, as though that was somehow going to answer all the problems without fixing processes first. So. And we still see it, and it still amuses us, I guess, that people are embarking on digital transformation projects like it's a finite thing, rather than just looking at how technology can enable, and to your point, whether it's even needed. Can they make do with what they've got?
Yes. Make do, improve, update. Although you could get to the stage, but where also at to you get to an end of life product where you do have to make the jump as well. And that presents a whole lot of other pain points going.
Do you have, is IT project the term that's banded around your place, or are they business projects?
No, it's an IT project. Okay, and this is where I've had several conversations with particularly new people that are been in the company for a little while, where they say, "Oh, this is an IT project." I'm saying, no, this is a business project. We're here to support you and nudge you where you need to, but it's this should be, you need to lead this, because I can't go to the supplier and say I want this, that, and the other, or your there's existing supplier. They need to be part of this, and this is where the tact comes in. You've got to be diplomatic, always with a smile and in a nice way, to make sure that they don't feel that you're being standoffish. And if I've had to do this in emails as well as face to face. Emails, you've got to be really careful in communication that they kind of unoffended in any way, shape, or form with the buff that you're giving them. It's got to be a polite, no, this is yours. We're here to help you, but let us know how we can help you. But they have to drive this. But as I said before, you quite often get people that have never been involved in a project before because they're already so business focused, and they don't know how to handle this. So they rely on our experience to help guide them. So I guess we do to a certain extent. But
do you think that's where the reluctance is to take ownership of these things, because it's unfamiliar and not common? Or
I think everyone's scared of failure, and they're quite happy to let IT take the fall. And this is where I think, having been doing this for a while now, I think this is where I'm getting less afraid to sort of say no. That we're not going to do this, or I had a recent case where I had a vendor presenting a project plan and a timeline with one of the major business sponsors and a whole lot of other people on board, and I said to them, that your timeline's a fantasy, because we can't deliver in that time. You haven't spoken to us about what you want. Yeah, you're only getting us involved now in this project. That was the business bunch of the vendor, and came to our part of the business late with it, and it's like, no, they had to go for a minimal viable product instead. Phase one scenario, and release it in stages, because we just knew it and possible. I said, and I didn't want IT to be the blocker or be the scapegoat for this. And that's where sometimes you have to have a harsh conversation to make the business wake up to reality. I know they've got their timelines that they want to meet, because they've got sales targets or deadlines, etc. But at the end of the day, you're putting extra pressure on IT. I need to protect my team, my staff. I can't have them working, silly hours simply because somebody wants something done for a deadline has particularly no particular relevance. And sometimes you actually have to push back and say, what's the business value of this? And what's the commercial reasons that we need this done by? And that's where sometimes some businesses actually stand up and sort of sit back and listen, because it's like, this is just something we want to do rather than something we have to do. And we've got to prioritize the work that we need to do based on, is it a legal requirement? Quite often countries come in with new requirements on invoices that we have to produce, or medical regulations are changing, so we have to update packaging and invoice and documents and things like that. That takes priority over other things. Break fix, and then we look at sort of projects as well. So it's managing all these different strands as part of the role that makes it quite challenging, quite interesting.
How involved are you with the IT vendor relationships? Because that's something we ran a meeting a long time ago with one of the local finance institutions here, and they were saying that they make a point to work very closely with their IT vendors because they want it to be a relationship, and they want the vendor to care about them, be involved in strategy, and because what the IT vendor delivers, they want it to be the best product and the most viable solution, not just kind of selling as much as they can to whoever's listening.
Look, and that's a two-way street. I've got vendors here who we're trying to build strategies with together, and gone to meetings at their site. We have, we're about to have, a strategy meeting for what we're going to deliver for this upcoming year, as soon as the budgets get signed off, of course, which was a challenge itself. And on the flip side, we're trying to integrate ourselves with our customers, and that's a very delicate relationship to do because it's a lot more. Some of them are quite advanced with the technologies, others aren't. So that's a very fine balancing act where we let the sales teams and the commercial leaders do the front end work of that, and we'll go in as necessary to discuss what we can help with. So that's a bit fine on the strategy side when we're doing it in reverse. So, but dealing with our vendors. That's something that I do, and something that is always fun to do. All the paperwork that goes behind it as well, just in the middle, signing off master service agreements and statements of works and things, and you kind of figure how much time paperwork can sometimes take.
Yeah. How with the rest of your team, the guys you work with, what do you think has been the thing that's helped you most, either through something you've learned at training or an approach that you've designed in-house? What do you think has helped the BRM team kind of progress the most?
You know what? I think it's empathy. Going back, simply because everyone's got different skill sets in the team, and it's knowing how they best fit in to help, and helping them understand things from a different perspective as well. I don't know whether I've come in with a different mindset to them, because a lot of them have grown up in the company, have been there for several years.
Yeah.
Coming in with a different perspective makes them think a little bit differently, or at least I'm hopefully trying to make them think a little bit differently. It's quite easy to get into a rut. It's quite easy to come in, do your job, go home, and not think about the implications of what you're doing. And hopefully I've kind of brought the team a bit closer together and thinking together as a whole, and rather than thinking of their just separate components, trying to see the bigger picture and seeing what they do, what effect it has on the whole company. It's having those sort of values that hopefully have evolved over time and made them feel a little bit more not included in things, because sometimes IT gets pushed. Your IT, you're in the background. Try bringing it more to the forefront.
As your closing advice, then, is empathy what you would say that if you're going to focus on one thing as a BRM, that would be it, or is there any other advice you would give other people?
There's you do need your technical skills. You do need your ability to build those relationships with people, but until you understand, what their wants are, how they operate, and see it from their side, then you're only going to be building half a system, half a project. I think just seeing it from their side, I think always helps, particularly if you've come from a technical background or an IT sort of background. It just gives you that sort of different view on things.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Dennis. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and some really it's nice to be in each of these episodes. We've had some kind of fresh insights shared, so there'll be something for everyone in there. But as I say, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for joining the episode, and I'll look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thanks so much, everyone, for listening or for watching, and remember to subscribe so you don't miss future shows. Thanks so much, Dennis.
Thank you.